All right, hey there. Welcome to the DFS Build NBA edition. I'm Kevin Roberts, starting with Taylor Smith. We are getting ready to go over the Monday DraftKings NBA slate. Obviously, our goal is to help you out. It kind of helps us too. We like going through this. It helps our process. And along the way, we're going to hand out our favorite plays, but also factor in ownership, projection, matchups, all that fun stuff that will hopefully help you win. If this does help you in any way, please smash that like button and also subscribe to the channel. The likes help us out, get us a little bit more availability on YouTube, and also the subscribes help us quite a bit, build a community, and also alert you to future videos just like this. We cover the NBA and NFL every slate we can. Speaking of which, we have a Monday Night Football DFS Showdown slate video that you can catch at the end of this video or just hit up our channel. Either way, let's get into it. For the bigger slates, it's not that big of a slate, but either way, we go position by position, starting with point guard. Taylor, like usual, Cade Cunningham looks awesome. He is 9.3K with a 53-point fantasy projection. He is shaping up to be quite chalky as he's got the best matchup of the slate against the Bulls. So let's just start there. What are you doing with Cade at that ownership and price?
Playing him probably because he's like $1,000 too cheap, and the Bulls are probably the second best matchup you can possibly have. So hard to overlook him. There's also not a lot to pay up for, especially on DK with only 6 games. Like Giannis is in a horrible spot. There's a ton of cheap value. I think paying up for Cade will be a popular approach, but ownership would be the only thing that would kind of sour me on him. But even that's not going to be enough. I think he's very clearly the top point guard on the slate.
Agreed. I don't think there's any reason to get away from him, especially since the other guys that you'd be pivoting to are kind of in the same price range and have a way worse projection and a way worse matchup. It's just like, why are we playing Dame or Brunson just for fun? Like, that seems kind of silly. Obviously, for ownership reasons, you can do that. Brunson and Dame come in with the second and third best projection at the position, and neither of them are going to be more than 8% owned, at least right now. So one guy that is kind of in that price range that is kind of interesting would be Tyrese Halliburton, 8.2K, good projection. He is carrying ownership at 13%. I mean, if you're going to go down from Cade, I think he's the guy to do it with. And also, I still really like Devin Booker. His projection is not good because he's facing a still solid Magic defense, but they don't have Paolo Banchero. So I think 9.5K Devin Booker, who presently is not getting ownership, is kind of interesting. So after Cade, with that next batch of guys that I just rattled off, who is popping for you?
It's McConnell. I mean, McConnell. Halliburton. Well, it is McConnell, but Halliburton is the one on the high end I'm getting more of. I hate it. The matchup's great, but his range of outcomes has been insanely wide and mostly bad so far. The matchup's good, though. Toronto, fast-paced team, horrible defensive team, injuries for them. Halliburton has upside. They have injuries too. The Pacers are going to be down a couple of guards and maybe Miles Turner. So someone has to get usage for them. He might get some of it. I think Brunson is a fine play. He hasn't really had a lot of ceiling this season with Towns in there, but the Wizards are the nut matchup. Like second in pace, I think, and dead last in defense, last in rebounding. They've lost like 9 games in a row. They're a horrible team, and all the Knicks are on the radar again tonight. Towns is the headliner, who we'll get to, but you can play Brunson as a leverage play and get different with that instead of simply eating Towns. But, I don't blame you if you don't want to play Brunson just because he's been kind of hit or miss as well.
Yeah, I mean, his price has only come up, even though, like you said, he's not really exhibited much of a ceiling. But I mean, this is, if you're looking for a get right spot for Brunson to smash a little ownership, this would be the spot. I don't know if you have to fade Cade to play him. You could just maybe not play Cat, who's probably going to be a lot more owned than Brunson. But Brunson at under 10% ownership against the Wizards obviously is pretty interesting. If we want to keep going down, I mean, Jimmy Butler's back, so I don't have a whole lot of interest in Tyler Hero. Worth noting that Terry Rozier is not playing, though. So I guess he's not completely out of play. At 8K, though, I'm not doing it. If we want to keep going down for value, I don't know. I guess Jared McCain is probably the guy that stands out the most. He continues to get run. Joel Embiid is doubtful. And obviously Tyrese Maxey remains out. So he looks pretty good, pretty solid value in the lower mid-range of 5.8K. And he's just like crushing every game, like 20 plus points in like 5 straight games. So, I mean, as things stand, Jared McCain might be my favorite value. There are cheaper guys, but not anyone who probably offer as good of a floor as he appears to.
No, I think playing him at shooting guard is probably the way to go, just because that's a weaker position, and there is other stuff like point guard only options to play. I mentioned McConnell, but Ben Shepherd is out, Neesmith is out, Nemhard is out. They're just running out of guards by the day.
Yeah.
McConnell doesn't need a ton of run to smash anyway. He's 4,100. He's, I think, 1.13 fantasy points per minute with those guys off the floor. I think RG had him at 24 minutes. If we get that, it's hard to overlook him. It's certainly, his floor is lower than that minutes wise. He could just still play 20, but even in 20 minutes at 4-1 in a great matchup, I think he's perfectly fine as a punt. But yeah, McCain for sure, I agree. Like, great play, bad matchup and stuff, but the role is just insane for him with Maxey and Embiid out.
Yeah, McConnell, though, the ownership is getting a little out of control, pushing 49%. McConnell's always a good play because he's a good per minutes guy. And with those other dudes out, you'd imagine his role is pretty safe. He's got a lot of games with like 17 minutes, though. So it's like, do the Pacers just not want to play him more? I don't know. But as things stand, it's tough to get away from at 4.1K. I agree. But anytime a guy is going to be 50% owned by the field, you do have to consider doing something different, just because that's insane. But he is a good play. Anybody else as far as punt wise that maybe if you wanted to get away from McConnell that is somewhere in that price range at point guard that we can kind of make a pivot?
I guess you could do it with Payne with McBride out. It's not comfortable and he doesn't project very well, but could be a blowout. The Knicks have 124 points team total. And if that happens, I think Cam Payne would be someone who would get some blowout run. So I guess you can make that straight line pivot if you want. There are a couple more mid-range guys. Kobe White is okay. I think Josh Giddey projects well. I don't really want to play him because his minutes are horrible and he's not very good, but he's still active per minute while he's out there. And then Jaden Ivey, shooting guard, point guard eligible. For the same reasons we like Cade, I think we can like Ivey quite a bit.
Yeah, I'll mention Fred VanVleet too. He's carrying ownership. Obviously, the matchup with the Bucks is not scary whatsoever, and he's under 7K. Decent projection too. So if you want to live in the mid-range at point guard, FVV is not the worst option in the world.
We're recording this early in the afternoon. I don't think we have their injury report on the second half of a back-to-back, but last time they had a back-to-back, they sat VanVleet.
Okay, good call.
In the second game, so it's possible that happens again, and if so, then the Rockets as a whole become a lot more appealing. Like Amen Thompson would be a smash play.
Yeah, Amen Thompson would be amazing. He's even had his own
small forward as well. We'll see.
Yeah, he's even had his own thing that he's been dealing with. So if they elect to also sit him, could be Reed Shepherd season. So keep an eye on the Rockets injury news. All right, over to shooting guard we go. Obviously, a lot of the same guys are eligible here. One guy we just touched on, Amen Thompson, is not a point guard. He's pretty much in play at 5.4K. You can play him anyways. He's getting decent minutes off the bench. But I like him a lot more, obviously, if Fred VanVleet is out. He'd be a core play if he's in and Fred is out. But let's start it up top. Devin Booker coming in with the best fantasy point projection at 40 points at shooting guard, and he is not projecting any ownership whatsoever. So obviously I don't like the matchup, but I love the role. KD remains out. Bradley Beal is out. So I don't know why the ownership isn't more on Booker here. Obviously Cade is like the same price. That's a big reason why. So whether or not you end up fading Cade, I think either pivoting from Cade to Devin is very much in play, or just getting to Booker one way or another. Because like you said, there are not many elite spend-ups unless you're paying for Giannis on the slate. So you kind of already touched on Booker. I think you're in agreement that he's a fine play, just maybe not a priority. Next up after him, not too far away, looking like a really interesting value play, is Zach LaVine with a 38-point fantasy projection, but he is carrying ownership because of that. How are you feeling about LaVine here? I think you already said you like some Bulls.
I think they're okay. LaVine, I always feel pretty good about. He's decently priced. I have quite a bit of him as of now. I'm playing him more at small forward, I think, just because shooting guard has Ivy, like we talked about, Mikal Bridges, like the Knicks look pretty good, like we've talked about. Bridges is kind of expensive. So is Anunoby at the forward position, but the matchup is like as good as it gets, like we said. So I don't mind Bridges there. McCain, you can play. I think I'm playing him at shooting guard quite a bit. A punt that I'm getting to now that I don't like, but I get is Duncan Robinson. with Rozier and Jaquez both out. That's a lot of minutes that are suddenly available. Jimmy is back, but Philadelphia without Embiid is not a good defensive team at all. Robinson is 3.9 shooting guard only on DK. I think it's a fine tournament value. A couple of mid-range guys I like a good amount are Jordan Poole, who I forgot to mention at point guard, and Jalen Green. High usage guards against the Bucks has been a thing since Dame got there, and they swapped Holiday out for him. Green's been pretty bad, but good bounce back spot. Shouldn't be very owned unless Van Vliet is out. And his price has come down. He's 6'7". I think that's pretty interesting on this slate.
Yeah, I like the Jalen Green call for sure. Even if Fred is in at 6.7K, I think he is in play. He's obviously much more interesting tournament play if Fred is still in. And if he's out, though, like you said, it's going to be pretty owned. But I mean, as far as eating chalk goes, I would much rather eat the Amen Thompson chalk and then maybe go up and get Şengün or something, just because Jalen Green is pretty scoring dependent and obviously just a volatile player in general. I mean, you can really live in the mid-range as shooting guard if you want to. I mean, I love Devin Booker up top, but Levine looks like an awesome value. You mentioned Kobe White. Benedict Matherin's pretty good at 6.5K. Jaden Ivey is viable. So there's a lot to like, a lot to go with. The thing is, though, like up top, it's Booker, and down low, I think it's McCain. But you can do a lot of things, and a little bit of what we're going to want to do is going to depend on what news does trickle in. What about big time punts? I think the big one would probably be Grayson Allen, projecting for about 25 minutes. No Beal, no KD. I think there might be one other guy who's iffy for this game for Phoenix. They've been yanking the minutes around for these rotation guys for the Suns. So, I mean, really the only guy you can trust is Booker at this point. But in theory, Grayson could be looking at 25 to 30 minutes here, and he could get hot, even though the matchup with Orlando is not great. How do you feel about him? And are there any other values at shooting guard that you like?
I think he's okay just because he's under 4K, pretty low opportunity cost at shooting guard. Also, it's not a great position, so I don't mind that. I forgot Tyus Jones at point guard, but he's decently priced as well with a pretty big role for them. I don't love the game. It's a very low total game, and Orlando's very good defensively, but the Suns do have some value on the cheap side.
Yeah, sure would be nice if Grayson was also small forward eligible. I feel like it's very random when these guys lose and gain eligibility. It's like when it would be beneficial, he no longer can be used as small forward.
Like Jalen Williams being center only now.
Yeah, just insane stuff like that. All right, let's move it over to small forward where things do change a little bit. Obviously, Zach LaVine. Oh, I'm sorry, that's not true. I didn't sort it. So this one is pretty top heavy. RJ Barrett with a 45-point fantasy projection with no Emmanuel Quickly. Franz Wagner not too far behind with 44 points. The prices have come up. The roles are massive. RJ Barrett's got the better matchup. I think I would lean him. That's where the ownership is leaning to. Both of them look really good. I just don't really want to pay 9.1K for Wagner here. I would rather play Cade or get up to Devin. I think they are more exciting plays, but Wagner is still good. I've said for the last week and a half with no Banchero there, he is the guy. So he looks totally fine.
Out lately.
I know he's been insane. So it's arguable he's not expensive enough. And then there's also Paul George. His projection is not that welcoming, but he is only 8.3K, and with Embiid probably out, I think he might be kind of sneaky if he remains not very owned, which right now he's coming at 6%. So I think Paul George is the most interesting play at small forward for me. Not that he has to be a priority, but if he's not going to be owned, I feel like that projection is a little bit too light.
I would have liked him more without Butler in, but Butler being back kind of makes me feel a little bit worse about him. He's a way better play on FanDuel where he's 7-3. That's insane for Paul George, regardless of injury news.
Right.
He's playable just because there should be usage to go around. Obviously, he and McCain both have 31% usage rates without Maxey and Embiid, but a little pricey. I do love Wagner quite a bit. I just think the matchup with KD and Beal out for Phoenix, they're not defending. Orlando favored in the game. He's going to get all the usage. He's been a god. He played 40 minutes in the last game. He's expensive, but he might be a 10K player in this role, so he might be underpriced relative to what that is without Paolo in there and Wendell Carter. So I think Franz is an awesome play. I think Barrett's an awesome play against Indiana. If you're playing a lot of Pacers, Barrett's the clear run back on the Toronto side that looks the best. There is value here. We talked about LaVine. I think he's fine. I like Bridges and Anunoby in the same range are okay. Matherin's fine, but not someone I'm getting to. It looks like he's somewhat popular. I'm not really getting there on him. And Thompson's good here, even if Van Vliet is in. Jarris Walker, though, is the core player with projected start for Indiana. Over a fantasy point per minute this season. And if Miles Turner is out, his minutes projection in theory will go up. So Walker is a good play as it stands now, but he might be a must play depending on the Turner news.
Yeah, and by the way, Wagner is like half the ownership of RJ Barrett. So you do have to go $500 up over Barrett, but as far as tournament plays go, he might be a little bit more appealing if RJ is going to carry some ownership there. And then obviously guys we already touched on, Zach LaVine, 7K flat. He looks good there too. You mentioned Matherin again. Jimmy Butler, 7.5K would be interesting if we can trust that there's not going to be any limit. He is coming back from an ankle injury. So I wouldn't be that shocked if he is a little limited or just, or whatever. So, but in theory, he is a pretty good value at 7.5, even though he doesn't project that well. If you want to take some dives, you can look at Dylan Brooks just because the minutes and the matchup are good. Torian Prince at 4.5K is not the worst just because he's getting heavy minutes. Obviously, Dame being back might kind of, go against that. One guy that's a little bit interesting, actually, I want to see if you agree with me here. Fontecchio at 3K flat. So he had been out for a little bit, but he's back. And if we can trust he's going to play 20 plus minutes, I mean, not the worst gamble at 3K.
I liked him before we had the Hardaway probable news. They just kind of have a lot of guys they can run out there. Like, 20 minutes might be enough for him at 3K, but, doesn't feel great. He's not a great per minute guy. I don't know. I understand that he's 3K. I just don't know if we need it. We have Walker. We have other stuff on this slate. He's underpriced technically, but not my fave. If the Rockets sit guys, Tari Eason might be someone worth on your as well.
Yeah, 5.5K. I mean, he's a good per minute guy anyways, projected for 25 minutes and 27 fantasy points. So if he gets an expanded role, he's definitely going to be very, very interesting. Waiting on that Houston news. Surely it will drop the second we finish this video because it's always how it goes. All right, over to power forward we go. Giannis is the pay up 60-point fantasy projection, best projection of the entire slate. The problem is, like you said earlier, not the best matchup on paper, and also he is 12K. This feels like a studless slate for me. Just live in the mid-range, get a little bit of value. Maybe don't take too many dumpster dives to the point where we're avoiding landmine after landmine on this slate, and just hope that Giannis doesn't get 96 or whatever. So if you don't want Giannis, I think Barrett and Wagner at power forward look like really good drop downs because you're getting potentially the same production for 3,000 less, right? So I think they look really, really good at power forward, specifically if you want to get off of Giannis. The one thing I will say about Giannis is he's not projecting for ownership. So it would be kind of fun to have under 10% owned Giannis get 90 again and nobody else has them. So before we get fired off with the rest of the power forward position, what are your thoughts on Giannis tonight?
I'm not really playing him. I understand why you would, but Houston is last I was defense. Is bad. If him was dead, I'd have a lot more interest in Giannis. But as it stands, even on a slate with plenty of value, I'm just not really getting there. He's 12K, which is pretty steep. TBH.
Indeed. All right, so we talked about some of these other plays that we like just fine. I think Paul George is a little sneaky. Barrett and Wagner look totally fine if you want to pay up for them there. One guy that looks interesting is Siakam. Does not have the best projection, but the matchup with the Raptors is really good. Obviously, you have a little bit of revenge narrative there, and the price is really nice. So I think he's a better play than Tyrese Halliburton when you look at the salaries. So I like him quite a bit. And then as we go down, I really just would probably be looking at values at that point. We mentioned Tari Eason and you said Walker for the Pacers too at 4.3K. Who's the guy that needs to be ruled out for him?
No one. They already have Ben Shepherd out. I said he's a good play now, but if Miles Turner is out, then Walker becomes even better. His minutes projection would go up. So I'm with you on Siakam. I think he's a strong play. Depending on the Turner news, I'm going to limit my Pacers exposure per lineup. I was thinking a max of 3. That might change if Turner's out and we get even more cheap stuff. I guess we'll see. But they're clearly the value team du jour on DK, where we don't have the Kings, but both are great plays. The cheap guys are interesting, I think. Chris Boucher for Toronto, no Bruno Fernando, who's been playing backup center next to Pirtle. Boucher is not really a center, but he's also kind of the only other big left behind Pirtle, along with Mobo. I think Boucher is an interesting tournament play. And Jovic now with Jaquez and Rozier out should have a decent role. He's 3-7. Like I said, Philly without Embiid's not a great defense. So I think Jovic is playable at 3-7.
No, yeah, for sure. Another guy I'll mention is Patrick Williams, only 4.8K. He had been crushing it 4 straight games, over 30 fantasy points. He's getting big minutes. I think he was hurt in the last game and was also a 40-point blowout loss to the Rockets. So whichever way you want to look at it, he's probable with his ailment. But as long as he's in, 4.8K in a pretty nice matchup with the Pistons, that looks like solid value to me too. And I don't think he's going to be that owned. 16%? That's not too bad. So he looks pretty interesting too. Also, Alexander Sarr, his price is ticking up slightly, but 5.5K. I mean, he's coming off a ceiling game, so I don't know how much I trust him. Obviously, he can have issues with foul trouble, and he's not a very good shooter in general. But he's getting minutes, and he's only 5.5K, so I don't think he's a terrible value either.
He's okay. Not really on my radar.
Yeah.
You can play Yabusele, no Embiid. Drummond might start, but Yabusele, and he might split the minutes. He's 4-6. I don't love it in that matchup, but I think he's okay. And then Jonathan Isaac, his minutes have been up a little bit late. Can't really play more than 24 because he's made of glass and spontaneously combusts if he does, but really good for me when he's out there. So I don't think Isaac is a bad play. I'm a little worried, though, if nothing else opens up. He's currently projected to be somewhat popular, and he's not a guy I want to play into ownership. But if the ownership comes down, I think he's pretty interesting.
Yeah, I mean, he is a good permanent guy, and he's still really cheap, so I'm okay with it too. I just hope a better value opens up. I mean, I would prefer Walker over him in the same price range for sure.
Walker's like a lock. Like you play him no matter what, I think.
Famous last words in NBA DFS, surely. All right, let's wrap it up at center. Giannis obviously is over there too. He looks good as far as projection goes and ownership, but very expensive. Cat looks like one of the best plays of the slate, 52 fantasy point projection. He is too cheap for who he has been lately. He is absolutely crushing, and the matchup with the Wizards is as good as it gets. I don't really care if he's owned. I think if you don't want to play Cat, Brunson is a pretty good leverage play as things stand, but I just don't see why you wouldn't play Cat on the slate. I'm going to probably lock him in personally. Embiid is doubtful, so we don't have to worry about him, but we can play Drummond, who is, what is his price, 6.6?
5.6.
Okay, so he looks like a really good play if Embiid is out. I have no problems with that. He'll probably be chalky, but that will be fine.
Doesn't look like he will be as of now. He's not projected.
Well, then that's even more interesting. I mean, obviously, anytime Embiid is out and we can get Drummond, we have to consider that. I'm not really interested in Bam with Jimmy back. It's okay. You can play him. 8.5 isn't egregious. It's just not really what I want to do. I'd rather save $400 and get Şengün. He looks like a great play on this slate. If some guys for Houston are out and he's not one of them, he's even better. Jakob Poeltl has a good projection. Vooch has a good projection. These guys all look great. Siakam at 7.2 is an even better value compared to all the guys I just mentioned. As I said before, Jalen Duren against the Bulls, he looks good at 6.1K. Center is loaded. We don't have Jokic and we don't have Sabonis on this slate, but we have Giannis and we have Cat. I think Cat is the play. But if you want to save, you absolutely have a lot of different options to choose from.
I don't know if you mentioned Miles Turner if he plays.
If he's in,
Toronto. Yeah, he's a little expensive, but minutes have been up for him. They have injuries. I think he's a pretty strong play. Drummond, if he is unowned, he's cheap. The minutes for him haven't been amazing without Embiid, but he's so good per minute that he can still get you a cheap double-double. I think that's totally in play. And he's underpriced.
I don't think he's going to be overlooked though. Right now at Roto Grinders and probably anywhere you look, they're projecting Embiid in. At least it just hasn't been updated yet. So with Embiid out, I guarantee that's going to shift. And then he at 5.6. I mean, if he was like 6.6 still
projected out, and Drummond projected for like 13% ownership.
Let me try to refresh here so I can get a clearer idea of what we're dealing with. But yeah, I mean, I don't really care. At 5.6, Drummond is, even if he ends up being a little bit chalky or even very chalky, he's going to be very hard to get away from. But pairing him with Cat is obviously in play. And if you don't want to eat the chalk with Cat, you can obviously pick between any of these other guys that I mentioned. Of the ones that I mentioned, I think Şengün's my favorite. He just offers a better ceiling than guys like Bam or Pirtle, and he probably has a similar floor, and his price is cheaper than Bam and only just a little bit more than Pirtle. So he's probably the guy I'd go to if I want to live in that range. Yeah, you're right. Drummond is now looking at 30-point fantasy projection and going up against, he is going up against Bam. It's not like it's a soft matchup by any means. Bam is not a fun guy to play guys against, but I still really like Drummond here. If you don't want to play Drummond, any other values here at center?
Might go Mo Wagner for Orlando with Carter doubtful. Minutes are there. I wouldn't play them together, obviously. Huh?
I said forever a Mo Wagner supporter.
He's good per minute, and he's still cheap, and I don't think anyone's going to really be on him. Just pretty good value. Go for the same reasons. Yeah, it's really all about Towns and Drummond. I think that's a really good combo, or Miles Turner. Duran, I would like. The matchup's really good against Chicago. They've just been really weird about his minutes lately. I keep waiting for him to smash, and he keeps not smashing. So this is probably the time he'll do it when I'm not really interested. But I can see why you'd play him.
So I don't want to tell anybody to not play Towns because he's such a good play on this slate. I do think, though, one interesting tournament strategy is to drop down and get... Huh?
We just got Yusuf Nurkic is out. So
okay.
My Mason Plumlee season. I think they started together.
They did. I was literally going to bring this up. I didn't think it'd be very that big of a deal or that relevant, but now it's worth talking about because Plumlee, it looks like a smash value because he'll start by himself there. Also, by the way, now that they can't start together, we should feel a little bit better about guys like Okogie or Ryan Dunn because they lost minutes because they went to super big. Also, not really something they have to do against Orlando, right? That's something they had to do to begin with. But yeah, Plumlee is 4.5, great value.
Or 8, yeah.
Yeah. So, why don't you give your thoughts on him in that situation first, real quick?
Yeah, the Magic typically have a center it's Goga or Mo Wagner out there, so I think it will be big enough for Plumlee to get the minutes. They also have this guy, Oso Ighodaro, who is 3-4 and has been playing a role lately, 26 and 27 minutes in the last couple games. Honestly, don't know anything about his game. I don't know who he is. He has a cool name, I think. He's power forward center also.
Start him everywhere. He has a cool name.
He was already projected for 19 minutes, and I assume that will come up now once they take Nurkic out of the projections.
Is he only center eligible?
Power forward center.
Oh, now you're talking my language.
Yeah.
Okay. I don't hate that.
Didn't see that coming.
Yeah.
So Plumlee now looks better than a guy like Mo Wagner, obviously, but he's going to be owned accordingly, I would think. Plumlee's
he'll be owned.
Nurkic has missed games recently, at least one game recently. Plumlee is not historically a guy that will completely murder, but he did play well in that start. So pretty good play.
Yeah. So what do you think happens here? Obviously Plumlee is going to be needed. So he'll start and he'll probably push for 30 minutes against Orlando. Do you think this ends up boosting Plumlee's ownership is going to be up, but do you think this ends up taking away Cat's ownership because there's going to be a lot more value center builds with Drummond there too?
It certainly could. You can only play 2 of them,
right?
At least the center only types. So Towns, I still think he'll be popular just because there's not a ton to pay for on this slate, and he's an awesome play, but naturally it will take some ownership, I think, just because you have to use a spot on Plumlee, and I think people will do that.
Right. So what I was kind of getting to before that news broke was that an interesting tournament strategy could be to get away from Towns if he's going to be 30% or more owned. And you don't necessarily have to do it with Brunson, but the fastest way would be to leverage that ownership with Brunson on the same team, and he crushes against the Wizards instead of Cat, nuking the slate. But either way, just go spend your money on somebody else who projects well, like a Wagner or a Barrett, and then just eat the value at center, Drummond and Plumlee. I think that is definitely looking like a viable tournament strategy. I don't like fading Towns at that price with that projection, but also let's consider it could easily be a blowout, and maybe we don't get a full game from Towns if the game gets out of control. So just something to consider. Towns remains an amazing play. It just, if there's this much value at center, it might be a little bit difficult to, pass it up is the thing. If you had to pick one. Well, if you had to pick one value at center, though, with all the things we know, who would it be for you?
It's super close between Drummond and Plumlee. I'd feel a little bit better about Plumlee's minutes just because the Sixers haven't extended Drummond too much.
Plus, he's cheaper.
He is cheaper, like $800 cheaper. So probably Plumlee, but I think the ownership, if anything, it's going to take ownership away from Drummond if he was going to get any. So if you consider ownership, I think I prefer Drummond because I assume Plumlee will be the chalkier of the two.
Yeah, well, good call on the minutes thing too. They really are not, like, Drummond is not a good bet to get 30 minutes, even with him beat out. He just isn't. And Yabusele has been pretty good, so they could also just kind of split it even more so. I think I said that name correctly. I'm not sure. But then, also, like I said before, Drummond is facing Bam Adebayo. It's not a good matchup. Like, he's not going to come in here and just completely wreck Bam, probably. You're just betting on the price and the points per minute, like what he does historically, and it could work out just fine. But definitely, these are all just things to consider. All right, before we wrap up here, what is your number one flag plant and your overall strategy for the slate?
So, like I said, I think I'll set a max of, I haven't decided yet, but 2 to 3 Pacers per lineup, just because as of now that's the value team. But there is other value. I think limiting yourself to a certain number of Pacers will help make your lineup a little bit different. So that's something I don't mind. My flag plant, as of now, I guess it's going to be Towns, but the center, not old either, honestly. So it's hard to say. I'm just not paying up for Giannis. I guess that would be the flag plant, but I think most of the field is not paying up for Giannis.
Yeah, I think all things considered, mine is going to be that I am going to pay up for Giannis. I did not think I was going to do that going into the slate, but now that we have 2 really good value plays at center and more value opening up as we go, like, who else can actually hit Giannis, like, consistently, like, that we can trust in? Nobody. Like, if Giannis comes in here with more and more value popping up, and he gets, by the way, he's power forward eligible too, so you can still take advantage of the value at center and not lose out on a stud like Cat. So you're paying $3K more, and then maybe leverage it with Brunson or somebody else. I don't know if you really, I think Giannis is going to be the leverage, really. But just, I don't know.
You don't need more leverage if
Giannis
is
I don't think you do. So I think I would, if you're running a lot of lineups, I would try that a little bit. Like, that wouldn't be like something I go super hard at, but I think it's an interesting single entry play or for smaller tournaments, just because a lot of the ownership is still going to flock towards Towns, and rightfully so, no doubt about it. But if Giannis can be unowned and we don't want to bypass some of this value, I think it's a pretty interesting strategy for sure. All right, that is going to do it for us. Hopefully this helps you out. If it did, smash that like button and subscribe to the channel so you do not miss out on future videos just like this. And also, just a reminder, Monday Night Football DFS Showdown video is at the end of this video, so be sure to watch that so we can help you win some money in NFL too. Thanks for watching, and good luck.